When historians finally sat down to read the rule of the temple in full, they were baffled. The most feared military order of the Middle Ages, men trained to charge armies 10 times their size, had written hundreds of articles of law, and an absurd number of them said nothing about tactics, swords, or horses. They talked about how to sleep. Why did the deadliest order of warriors in Christendom care so much about a good night's sleep? The answer is frighteningly simple and practical to the bone. The battle isn't won by the knight who charges with the most fury in the first 10 minutes. It's won by the side that, when the alarm cry tears through the dawn, is already on its feet, dressed, shod, seeing, while the enemy is still fumbling in the dark for his trousers. Most medieval armies slept however they could. An ordinary crusader camp was an armed crowd. Nobles, mercenaries, peasants, servants, merchants, thieves, all mixed together. There was heavy drinking, arguing, gambling, brawling. Men collapsed wherever they landed and woke up stiff with cold, their necks locked, furious at the whole world. Sounds a bit like that night you slept on a friend's living room floor after the party, doesn't it? The difference is that these people had to kill someone the next day. The Templars looked at that chaos and did something no one had done before. They turned sleep into written law. And here, I need to introduce the two sources that everything you're about to hear today rests on, because none of this is speculation. The first is the primitive rule, drafted around the Council of Troyes in 1129, 76 articles that founded the order. The second is the hierarchical statutes, the military portion of the rule, which survived in an old French text published in 1886 by the scholar Henri de Curzon under the title La Règle du Temple. These two documents are the reason we know, down to the clause, exactly how a Templar slept. This isn't legend, it's legislation. And look at the scale of it. A Templar spent the entire day in armor under the sun of the Holy Land. Any modern person after that would just want to collapse into a soft bed. But the warrior monk lay down dressed, with his shoes and belt on, under a burning lamp. And in the dead of night, when sleep runs deepest, he got up in the dark to pray. Every single night, for the rest of his life. My shoulders start aching treacherously just from saying that out loud. Why waste precious hours of rest? Because absolute security translates directly into the deepest stage of human sleep. If a man knows for certain he won't have his throat cut in the dark, because the light is on, because the perimeter is governed by law, because the brother next to him is dressed exactly like he is, his brain actually relaxes. Modern sleep specialists call this stress management during physiological recovery. The Templars simply called it the rule, 800 years before the word circadian existed. Today we're going to examine in detail the hidden anatomy of Templar sleep under wartime conditions. The watch will be long. You'll find out why it was against the law to sleep in the dark. I'll show you the article that forbade a Templar from leaving camp, and the unforgettable phrase it uses to say so. And I'll tell you why a Templar who failed lost something worse than his own life. Subscribe to the channel, get comfortable, and come with me. The Templars crushed enemies across the whole of the Holy Land. But for a Templar, the center of the world was the place where he lay down to sleep. And the law governing that place is the single most important clause in this entire video. Primitive Rule, Clause 21, titled On Bedding. It states, word for word, "And they shall always sleep clothed in shirt, breeches, shoes, and belts, and the place where they sleep shall be lit until morning." One sentence, two laws that would shape those men's lives for 2 centuries. Clothing and light. Start with the clothing. Every night for the rest of your life, you lie down fully dressed. Never that relief of stripping everything off and burrowing under the blankets. Never. Shoes on, belt buckled. And it wasn't modesty. It was so the brother could react instantly. 3 in the morning, enemy territory, a scream tearing through the camp, and while the secular knight in the tent next door wakes up naked, groping in the dark for his breeches, stumbling, cursing, losing 30 seconds that decide everything, the Templar is already on his feet, dressed. He only needs to grab his sword. It's the same principle as the firefighter who sleeps with his uniform beside the bed, or the on-call doctor who naps in his coat. The rule of the temple invented being on call 800 years before the phrase existed, and the bed itself? Here, the rule is surprisingly specific. That same clause 21 states that each brother needs no more than a mattress, a pillow, and a blanket, and whoever lacks one of the 3 can be given a rug instead. It wasn't straw thrown on the floor as many people imagine, but it wasn't comfort either. It was a calculated minimum, and Clause 18 closes the loop in a way I love, banning any adornment and ruling that a brother shall have not even a single blanket, unless it be of lamb's wool or sheep's wool. Think about that. This man could belong to the richest organization in Christendom, owner of fortresses, of fleets, banker to kings and popes, and the law specified the fabric of his blanket. The vow of poverty wasn't rhetoric. It was written into the article, measured in wool. And there's a human detail almost nobody mentions. Clause 20 opens an almost tender exception. Because of the great intensity of the heat that exists in the East between Easter and All Saints' Day, any brother who wished could be given a linen shirt, and the text is careful to say this was granted out of compassion, and in no way as a right. In other words, even the harshest lawmakers of the Middle Ages understood that sleeping in wool through the desert summer was inhuman. They gave ground, but they gave it as a kindness, never as an entitlement. Equipment stayed within arm's reach, always, because in the dark, searching means dying. And the horses? Clause 51 is precise. To each knight brother, we grant 3 horses and 1 squire. And the text explains that the limit exists because of the great poverty that currently exists in the house of God and the temple of Solomon. 3 horses and a squire. That was the entire material world of a Templar knight. But back to Clause 21 because it has a second half we haven't opened yet, the one about light. And it's the strangest rule in the whole order. And the place where they sleep shall be lit until morning. Never dark. Never. Every night of your life you sleep under the flickering light of a flame. Clause 21 doesn't explain why, but the rule explains it elsewhere, and it's a sentence that gives you chills. Clause 37, dealing with brothers sent far from home, states that the house where they sleep and lodge shall not be left without light at night, so that dark enemies may not lead them into wickedness, which may God forbid them. Dark enemies. That's the exact phrase in the text. An order of warrior monks, young, strong men bound by a vow of chastity, sleeping side by side for life, needed a mechanism that made it physically impossible for anything to happen without a witness. Light was that mechanism. Permanent vigilance, built into the architecture of the night. But notice the accidental genius here, because the lamp solved 2 problems at once, and the second one is purely military. A man who wakes in total darkness is blind for several seconds. His eyes need time to adjust, and in that time, he's a fumbling target. A man who wakes under a lit lamp can already see. He sees the sword. He sees the door. He sees who has come in. That cheap little oil lamp was, at the same time, a system of religious morality and a system of defense. It's the same reason hospital corridors and military barracks are never left completely dark even today. Whoever wakes up seeing reacts. Whoever wakes up blind dies. And here comes the cruelest irony in Templar history. This rule, created precisely to prevent any indecency, to make everything visible, was turned on its head centuries later. When the King of France decided to destroy the order in 1307, one of the fabricated charges brought against them, extracted under torture, was precisely indecency between brothers. The very men who had written into their own law that a lamp must burn all night exactly so that nothing could happen in secret were accused of doing things in secret. The rule that proved their discipline was used as proof of the opposite. And if the light never went out, there was something else that also never happened there. Nobody spoke. After Compline, the last prayer of the day, silence fell over the house like a lid. And again, this is law, not custom. Clause 31, on keeping silence. When the brothers leave Compline, they are not permitted to speak openly except in case of emergency. But let each one go to his bed quietly and silently. And there the clause opens the only crack in the night, and it's touchingly practical. And if he needs to speak to his squire, he must say what he has to say softly and quietly. It's the only voice allowed in the dark. A knight, lying down, whispering one last instruction to the boy who tends his horses. Clause 32 rounds this out by forbidding idle words and wicked outbursts of laughter, and ruling that anyone who says what he shouldn't must, in humility, say an Our Father when he lies down. And again, underneath the religious strictness, there's a military layer. A silent camp is a camp that listens, without talk, without laughter. Every sound from outside becomes audible. The snapping branch, the horse spooking for no clear reason. In an ordinary crusader camp, an approaching enemy is just one more noise in the chaos. In a Templar camp, he is the noise. Their silence wasn't only prayer, it was radar. In fact, this obsession with watching one another shows up in the most unexpected place in the rule, at mealtimes. Clause 25 orders that the brothers eat in pairs, and the justification is remarkable, so that one may observe the other more closely, and so that neither austerity nor secret abstinence may be introduced into the community meal. See it? They ate in pairs to make sure the brother was eating enough. The order feared some fanatic might starve himself in secret and arrive weak for battle. Even excessive holiness was a military risk, and now the mantle, the most famous garment in medieval history. Clause 17 rules that habits should be a single color, and grants the Knight brothers white mantles, making clear that no one who does not belong to the said Knights of Christ is permitted to have a white mantle. The reason, the text says, is that those who have abandoned the life of darkness may recognize one another by the sign of the white habit, which signifies purity and complete chastity. Clause 68 confirms the other side of it. Squires and sergeants may not wear white. They receive black, or whatever the cheapest available cloth is. And the Red Cross? It's not in the primitive rule. And this matters, because almost every video about the Templars gets it wrong. The white mantle comes from the Council of Troyes in 1129. The Red Cross came later. It was granted in 1147 by Pope Eugene III, and from then on was sewn onto the left shoulder. 18 years separate the mantle from the most famous symbol of the Middle Ages, and here lies the reversal. I find the most revealing thing about these men. A Roman legionary wore a mantle in a natural color, brown or dirty gray, precisely so as not to stand out. Camouflage. The Templar did the exact opposite, white, with a red cross on his chest, the most visible color there is, with the most visible mark imaginable stamped on top of it. Why? Because he wasn't hiding. That mantle wasn't camouflage, it was an announcement. A man telling the enemy from a distance exactly who he was, and that there would be no negotiation. On the subject of wool, I need to be honest with you, and set the record straight on something the internet keeps repeating. You'll read everywhere that medieval wool was waterproof like Gore-Tex thanks to lanolin, the sheep's natural grease. That's an exaggeration at best. The wool used to make cloth was washed and fulled, a process that removes exactly that grease. What is true and needs no myth at all is simpler. Wool keeps you warm even wet. It keeps insulating even when soaked, something almost no other natural fiber does. That's what saved those men in the cold of the desert night, and that's why Clause 18 specified the blanket had to be wool. Not just anything, but all of this applied inside a house, with walls. And in wartime, how do you sleep out in the open field, with the enemy just a few kilometers away? This is where the rule stops being monastic and becomes a terrifying military manual. Here we leave the primitive rule and enter the hierarchical statutes, the military section in the old French text that Henri de Curzon published in 1886. And here it becomes clear that these monks were, above all, engineers of discipline. The wall of the Templar camp wasn't made of earth. It was made of law. Article 148, titled How the Brothers Should Make Camp, states that when the gonfalon, the standard, comes to a halt, the brothers shall camp around the chapel, each arriving in his own row, the chapel in the middle, and the whole order around it, not as decoration, as a physical reference point. In total darkness, every man there knew exactly where the center of the world was. And the same article leaves no doubt about who's in charge. No brother shall take his place until the crier has called out, "Make camp, Lord brothers, in the name of God," and until the marshal has chosen his own place first. Only 4 things had priority: the master, the chapel, the supply tent, and the commander of the land. Everyone else waited for the order. Article 149 draws the invisible perimeter. No brother may go further than the point where he can still hear the crier or the bell. And it adds, neither in war nor in peace shall any brother ride a league of land without permission. You didn't wander. The leash was acoustic. You could go as far as you could still hear the order's voice. Forward. And Article 156 deals with the most dangerous moment of all. When the convent wishes to ride out, the brothers shall not have their saddles put on, nor pack, nor mount, nor move from their place, except as the marshal shall proclaim it. It sounds like tedious bureaucracy until you realize what they understood before anyone else did. The most vulnerable moment for an army isn't the battle. It's the moment it's leaving camp. Half mounted, half not, baggage scattered, no formation. That's the gap where armies die. And the rule sealed it shut with a single sentence. But the article I really want to show you is Article 155. To me, it's the smartest thing ever written about war in the entire Middle Ages. It answers a single question. What do you do when the alarm cry goes up in the middle of the night? If a cry rises in the camp, those who are on the side of the cry shall go out there with their shields and their lances, and the other brothers shall go to the chapel to hear the order that will be given. Stop and think about that. Every warrior's instinct on hearing attack in the middle of the night is to run toward the noise. Everyone runs. And that's exactly what kills armies in the dark. A swarm of armed men, half asleep, running in every direction, crashing into each other, and with terrifying frequency in night battles, killing each other by mistake. In an ordinary camp, nighttime panic did more damage than the enemy. The rules simply banned panic. Those nearby handle it with shield and lance. Those farther off don't rush to help. They go to the chapel, form up, and wait for orders. One sentence that stops an entire force from destroying itself in the dark. It's exactly the principle behind evacuation routes and assembly points in every modern building. Don't run toward the fire. Go to the meeting point. They wrote that down in the 12th century, and Article 155 ends with a line I had to reread twice when I first came across it. Speaking of a cry coming from outside the camp, the text says, "The brothers must not go out without permission," and adds, "not even for a lion, nor for a devouring beast." Meaning, if you hear someone being eaten alive by a lion out there in the dark, you stay where you are. No one leaves without permission. Not even for that. It's the coldest, most revealing sentence in the whole rule, because it shows exactly what these men understood. A cry in the dark is the oldest bait in the world, and an order that rushes out to save one man can lose 200. Article 159 repeats the same logic for the marching column, except there, brothers who aren't near the cry go to the marshal instead of the chapel. And Articles 162 and 163 close the loop by forbidding any brother to break from or leave the ranks without permission, with a single exception, and it's a beautiful one. If a Christian is in mortal danger nearby and your conscience commands you to help him, you may go without asking permission, and afterward return to your squadron calmly and peaceably. Whoever broke formation for any other reason paid dearly. He walked back to camp and lost everything that could be taken from him. Save the habit. Hold on to those two words. Save the habit. Because there is one punishment in the temple where the habit is not spared, and it is worse than death. Before the punishment, there's still the strangest piece of the Templar night. The moment it was cut in half. In the dead of night, the brothers were woken for matins, the night office. Clause 9 requires everyone to make every effort to hear matins and the entire service. Clause 16 rules that they remain standing throughout the office, every night, for the rest of their lives. Let that sink in. You've marched all day in armor, under the sun. You lay down, exhausted, at nightfall. And at the deepest point of the night, someone wakes you, and you get up in the cold, in the dark, and stand there praying. And how do you measure time in the middle of darkness with no clock? The rule has an answer I find fascinating. They measured devotion in our fathers. Clause 10 rules that a brother away on a mission who cannot hear the divine office should say, instead of matins, 13 Our Fathers, 7 for each hour and 9 for Vespers. 13, the exact number, is written into the law. That order's unit of measurement wasn't the hour or the minute, it was the prayer. And Clause 33 shows the human side of it. Brothers who fell ill from the house's labor could be excused from rising for matins with the master's permission, but they said the 13 Our Fathers instead, in such a way that the words reflect the heart. Now comes the question you've probably been asking for the last 10 minutes. How did these men not turn into zombies? And here's where the answer is genuinely beautiful. Because it's not that they endured some superhuman ordeal. It's that we are the ones who sleep strangely, not them. The American historian Roger Ekirch of Virginia Tech, in his book At Day's Close, Night in Times Past, found something that turned the modern understanding of sleep upside down. Combing through diaries, medical texts, literary works, and prayer books, he gathered more than 2,000 records across a dozen languages, showing that before electric light, People did not sleep 8 hours straight. They slept in 2 blocks. They went to bed shortly after nightfall, slept what they literally called their first sleep, woke naturally in the middle of the night, and stayed awake for an hour or more, praying, talking, thinking, having sex, before returning to a second sleep until dawn. See what that means? The night office wasn't fighting against the human body. It was fitted into a window of wakefulness the body was already opening on its own. The church took a natural pause in human sleep and filled it with prayer. And here I have to be fair to the science. This thesis is debated today. A study published in 2023 re-examined the evidence and questions how universal and mandatory this pattern really was, rather than being just one of several ways people slept. So I won't sell it to you as settled fact, but the overlap between the timing of matins and the wakeful window described in the sources is too large to ignore. And there's a hidden military bonus in this that I doubt was an accident. A Templar camp had every single night a scheduled moment when the entire order was standing, awake, dressed, and wide-eyed, right in the darkest part of the night. In other words, exactly the hour the whole world prefers for attacking people while they sleep. While the enemy was choosing the hour of deepest sleep to approach, the warrior monks were already awake, praying. A surprise attack at that hour against the Templars had an excellent chance of running straight into an entire order already on its feet. In ancient Rome, a legionary's worst crime was falling asleep on watch, and the punishment was the fustuarium. The soldier was beaten to death by his own tent mates. Either you keep your eyes open or you close them forever. The temple didn't do that. Their punishment wasn't death. It was worse. The order took away the habit. Sounds mild, taking a man's clothes. But here you need to understand why that was the only lever that actually worked. Why did the fustuarium work in Rome? Because the legionary feared death. He had a life waiting for him, land, retirement, a wife, children, old age. The threat of losing all of that kept his eyes open in the freezing wind. Now try that on a Templar. That man had already handed his life over to God. Clause 63 of the rule puts these words in his mouth. I shall avenge the death of Jesus Christ with my own death. For just as Jesus Christ gave his body for me, I am likewise ready to give my soul for my brothers. Threatening death against a man who prays for it isn't a punishment. It's a promise. So the temple found the one thing that man could still lose. A Templar had no family. He had renounced it. No property. Vow of poverty. He had exactly one thing, being a brother of the temple. That white mantle, which Clause 17 forbade any other human being on earth to wear, was his entire identity. And the penance section of the rule is merciless. A brother who left the house and spent 2 nights away lost the habit, and could not get it back for a year and a day. A year and a day without the mantle, among brothers still dressed in white, reminded at every meal of what he used to be and no longer was. If he carried forbidden things with him for more than 2 nights, he was expelled for good. And an expelled Templar was not a free man. He was a ghost. No family to return to, no money, no trade, no land, no right to call himself what he had spent his whole life being. A living dead man with a body still walking around. Rome killed the body and left the soul at peace. The temple killed the person and left the body walking. Remember Article 163, the one that stripped a man of everything if he broke formation, save the habit? Now you understand the weight of that exception. Even in punishment, the rule made a point of saying when the habit stayed, because when it didn't stay, that wasn't punishment anymore. It was an execution without a corpse. Modern companies motivate employees with free coffee and colorful beanbags. Rome motivated with the club. The temple motivated with something more sophisticated and more cruel. The threat of erasing you as a person. The Templars terrified Christendom's greatest enemy not just because they carried sharp swords. They won because they learned to manage human exhaustion better than anyone else of their time. Look at the whole system at once and notice that every single piece has an article number. Clause 21, ordering them to sleep, dressed and under a burning light. 30 seconds of advantage every night. Clause 18, specifying the wool of the blanket. Clause 31, sealing everyone's mouths after compline and turning the camp into one giant ear. Clause 25, having the men eat in pairs so they watch over each other's health. Article 148, putting the chapel at the center of the world. Article 149, tethering every man to the reach of the crier's voice. Article 155, banning panic, not even for a lion, nor a devouring beast. Article 156, freezing the entire camp until the marshal speaks. None of this is accidental. Every piece solves a problem, and the best ones solve two at once. One religious, one military, in the same gesture. That's why the rule worked. It never asked these men to choose between being monks and being soldiers. It designed a night in which being one was being the other. Light against sin was light against ambush. The silence of devotion was radar. The prayer at dawn was military vigilance. Modern sleep science keeps reminding us how important routine is, the right temperature, the absence of stress. The Templars didn't read medical papers. They wrote articles of law and arrived at the same place. By morning, the camp came alive within seconds. Tents folded, horses ready, brothers formed up, waiting for the marshal, because without his word, no one moved a foot. Ahead of them lay another day of marching under the sun, and maybe a battle. But they took the first step alert, warm and certain of their own superiority. And all of it thanks to the hours they'd spent lying down, dressed, under a blanket of sheep's wool, under a flame the law forbade them to extinguish. The story of the temple teaches a simple lesson. The most spectacular victories are almost never forged on the battlefield. They're forged in boring, daily, monotonous routine. Heroism is beautiful, but a rested, warm soldier will always beat an exhausted, frozen hero. Remember that the next time you sacrifice your sleep for one more hour of work, or one more episode, even history's toughest warrior monks needed to sleep properly to terrify the world. If you enjoyed this deep dive, support the video and subscribe to the channel. And tell me in the comments, could you survive a single night like that? Fully dressed, shoes and belt on, forbidden to speak, a lamp burning in your face, woken in the middle of the night to stand and pray in the cold, and forbidden to leave camp even if you heard a lion devouring a man out there in the dark. Could you survive one night? What about a whole lifetime? Hit like, share this, and remember, history is always more interesting than it looks at first glance. See you next time. And may you always sleep safe.